You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show. In just a moment, we'll be joined by presidential candidate Jon Huntsman. First time on the Laura Ingraham Show, and looking forward to hearing from him about why he said no to Trump, and why is it that for much of this campaign, he didn't seem to really run as a conservative. And instead, the former ambassador to China for President Obama ran as, in the eyes of many, kind of another Mitt Romney, kind of a Western Rocky Mountain State version of Mitt Romney. And that was curious to a lot of folks who kind of look at his record on a lot of issues and think, wow, he's pretty conservative. He started out on the motorcycle. Remember the motorcycle commercial? I still don't understand that. Going across the desert on the motorcycle, and we were supposed to, I guess, understand something profound about that, and people didn't get that. And this is what Governor Huntsman would routinely say about President Obama.
I respect the President of the United States. He and I have a difference of opinion on how to help a country we both love. But the question each of us wants the voters to answer is who will be the better president, not who's the better American. Well, if you start with the president's a nice guy and has great motives, I think you're going to have a lot of yawns out there. I mean, I don't think it's nice what's happening to this country under his leadership. And I think what Republicans want is someone who's not going to shower the president with compliments, but is going to dismantle his policies point by point. And joining us now for the first time on the Laura Ingraham Show, I'm delighted he's with us, former Utah governor and presidential candidate Jon Huntsman. Governor, great to have you on.
Hey, Laura, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What do you think about this RNC edict about campaigning? That look, if you're trying to argue that he's a man who's going to change the United States, has a bad set of ideas for the United States and make it personal, then that's a bad thing for Republicans. What is the RNC getting at here?
Well, you've got to call it on personal grounds, Laura. He had 2 years to get to infuse some sense of confidence in the economy. He's failed miserably. The thing that people care most about these days is getting jobs infused into our economy. We don't have enough in the way of opportunity. Our free market system is in a shambles right now, which makes it more difficult to compete, to create new enterprise. He failed the first 2 years. Let's just recognize it for what it is. And the candidates for president, are they going to put forward their ideas in terms of how we can get this machine functioning again, the greatest economy this world has ever known? And I suspect that in the end, you can pitch it any way you want. You can spin it any way you want. The president has failed us on the most important issue of the day, and that's the economy.
Yesterday in Kansas, the president tried to portray himself as a new Teddy Roosevelt, bringing a new nationalism to America. What is your take?
Well, he's done FDR, he's done Woodrow Wilson, he's done Teddy. Nobody cares. He had 2 years in which to fix the economy, to infuse some sense of life into it. We got Obamacare, we got a muddled environment, we got a lot of uncertainty. So you know what? It doesn't matter whether he's in Ohio, Illinois, California, New Hampshire. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody is even listening to the proposals because they've tuned out and are now looking at 2012. They want to know what lies around the bend and what the new candidates are going to do in terms of the most important issues of our day.
One thing that he said yesterday is that some billionaires, Governor, have a tax rate as low as 1%. Well, the RNC is telling us not to get personal, but that's a lie. That's something that was repeated from a Bloomberg television clip. The White House had to admit later that there was really no serious factual predicate for that, but there are, quote, various reports that talk about how rich people pay less in taxes. So is it personal to say that's a lie?
Well, here's the deal. He's engaging in class warfare, which people hate. Some say that, maybe this is a recipe for success. I say it's a recipe for disaster because this nation recognizes the dire straits that we are in. And I believe this nation will wake up and recognize proposals that will fix the economy when they're put forward. So this class rhetoric, the words that are just put out there that are meant to divide for political purposes is harmful to this nation, but I think the American people know better. And what we're looking for are proposals that will allow us to fire up this economic engine. The president's putting forward words. He's not putting forward proposals. He's not leading. And I think the American people are smart enough to see that.
There are folks who are talking about you really for the first time now. My friend Eric Erickson over at Red State, George Will, others in conservative media who are scratching their heads and they're saying, okay, this guy has a fairly conservative record on a number of issues. I'm going to bring up some of the issues that I take issue with you on, but a fairly conservative record. And yet, for much of the debate, it seems like, Governor, you were dismissive of some conservative positions, including this one. Let's listen.
You've also talked about some who were too extreme in their views to be elected president. Are you talking about some of your rivals?
Well, I'm talking about a Republican Party that dismisses mainstream science. You can't be on an extreme end of politics and expect to win over the independent vote.
That was the kind of soundbite that drove folks a little bit nutty, and probably including me, Governor. What did you mean by that?
Laura, I want to win this election. We've got to win back some people who actually voted for Barack Obama in order to get the math right. And I say, in order to put the coalition together that will allow a Republican to win, we've got to have the numbers in our favor. And that means we've got to win over some independents. That's just the bottom line.
Wait, who's dismissing mainstream science? Who's dismissing mainstream science, and what issues are you referring to, Governor?
I was referring to evolution, and I was referring to climate science, where 99 out of 100 climate scientists had weighed in on the subject matter. And I say some are going to disagree. That's okay, but I think we have to recognize science for what it is. It plays an important role in our advancement and development, and always will. And the industries of tomorrow, in large part, are going to be based on science. And I say we at least have to recognize it for what it is.
So you believe today that man can change the temperature of the planet?
I accept what the scientific community has to say about it. If 99 out of 100 climate scientists or members of the Academy of Sciences are going to weigh in on the subject matter, I say this probably belongs as an issue in the scientific lane as opposed to the political lane, because I don't know a lot of politicians on Capitol Hill who are physicists or climate scientists. Everybody's got an opinion on it. I say if you want to turn to a body of knowledge on some subject matter, I used to be president of the Cancer Institute many years ago. Right. And if you had 99 of 100 oncologists who stood up and said, with respect to breast cancer, colon, or prostate cancer, we've got a certain read on what causes it and where it might go, I think people would turn to them and say the scientific community has spoken. That's all I'm saying about it. Some people are going to disagree, but that's kind of where
okay,
I
but then it begs the question though, what to do about it, right? And I know there was a Western State initiative where folks in the Western states said, okay, we have to work against this climate change, and we've got to take these measures, but in the end, I mean, that's whether you characterize the scientists like this, or scientists sometimes change, or we find fraud in the scientific community in how this the climate change was measured over the years, and we know there was deep fraud in the way this is analyzed. The bottom line is, what about America? How are we going to make America strong if we walk into these these problems with this idea of, well, we've got to cap emissions, otherwise if we don't do that, then the climate's going to change. I mean, that's just a jobs killer.
Well, Laura, and you hit right on exactly the key point here, and that is, so what do you do about it? And I'm not one who's going to disadvantage this economy or hobble job creators by doing something that clearly is an international problem. I mean, unless you've got China and India and others who are willing to basically address their issue as well, you're unilaterally disarming, and I will not allow this country to do that. But, we forget that, many years ago, there were a lot of CEOs, a lot of experts in the field, Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, a whole lot of others, Tim Pawlenty. We're all kind of talking about best practices and ideas going forward. And a lot of people looked at the SOX and NOx approach to trading emissions back in the 1970s. It was based upon free market principles. And then it morphs into kind of a tax scheme under the Democrats, and people say this isn't good. This isn't going to work for us. And that's kind of where we are today. So I'm not one who's going to do anything to cause this nation to unilaterally disarm, number one. And number two, I'm not going to do anything as governor, where we had the best state in this nation for business. I delivered the largest tax cut in the history of our state, including a flat tax. The best place in which to do business in America. I know how that is done. I know the sensitivity of the free market system and what entrepreneurs need, and I want to reinfuse that back into our nation's economy.
Why did you kind of make this decision early on, it looked like, to run not as a conservative, but to run as, a lot of people thought you were kind of a Western states version of Mitt Romney, that you were kind of more genteel, more, you have kind of a more moderate viewpoint, yet I think a lot of folks are looking at your record saying, a couple things I disagree with, don't really like him on China, but on these other issues, he's pretty conservative. Did you decide to make that calculation early on?
Listen, first of all, I'm not sure that is a fair description of who I am. I think people are just now coming around to understanding and recognizing who I am. And maybe that takes a second look, and I understand that. And I do believe, Laura, that some people took a look at me at the beginning. They said he crossed party lines to serve as U.S. ambassador to China. I did. I believe in putting country first. I got 2 boys in the military. I preach that at home. If I wasn't willing to live it myself, what does it say about me as a human being? So I think a lot of people initially dismissed me because of that, and I understand that. I really do. And then they've come around later with others who, have tried to position themselves as an authentic conservative, and they're saying that Huntsman guy is a consistent conservative. We might not agree with everything he has done, but look at the record. Pro-life always has been. Pro-Second Amendment always has been. Pro-growth, the largest tax cut, tripled the rainy day fund,
right.
Delivered a flat tax, healthcare reform without a mandate, the second school voucher bill ever signed, embraces the Ryan plan. The list goes on and on. That's just who I am.
So are you a Reagan conservative in your mind?
I worked for Ronald Reagan. He had more impact over my life. The Margaret Thatcher approach, the Ronald Reagan approach to problem solving. I went to China with Ronald Reagan. My first trip I took to China as a young advanced man. I lived over in Taiwan before that in the late 1970s. He probably influenced my thinking more than anybody else.
So, yes, you would consider yourself a Reagan conservative then?
Yes, I would.
Is Newt Gingrich a conservative?
Well, if your definition of conservative is a grandiose insider in Washington, then Newt's your guy.
Is Mitt Romney a conservative in your mind?
Well, if your definition of conservative is someone who will pander to any crowd they happen to be in front of and find himself on both sides of every major issue of the day, then he's your conservative. I mean,
okay, what's the word? What's the word in Mandarin for stiletto? The phrase for stiletto in the back. I mean, that is, you can say it in Chinese too. That's good. Or Mandarin.
I'm not going to get myself in trouble that way again. But if you just want to distill it down to your definition of whatever your definition of conservative is, just take a look at the field. Take a look at the field, and that's kind of what you're left with. If your definition of conservative is consistency driven by one's core, that's where I am.
Okay, here's where I mean we don't have time, unfortunately, to get into the immigration issue, which is critical. But I think a lot of people think you're going to be for amnesty. You're going to get in there because you obviously were for your own. I guess you had your own kind of DREAM Act thing in Utah, and people were in favor of that in Utah, and that was passed. But people think you're going to ultimately, if president, push legalization and voting rights for illegal aliens in the United States. Would you do that?
Oh, come on, that's nonsense. That is absolute and utter nonsense. First of all, let me say what we have today, Laura. I know a lot of people don't like to recognize it as such. What we have today is amnesty. We're doing nothing about it. What we have today is de facto amnesty.
Right, would you make it official amnesty? Would you make it official amnesty? Would you make it official amnesty?
No, I would not make it official amnesty. Absolutely not. I would secure the border, number one, because this whole discussion has zero intellectual credibility until we can confirm with the 4 border state governors that we've actually done something about it. That would be my first step.
Gov, we're out of time, you have to come back next week. I'm going to invite you back next week. We're going to talk about China.
Listen, would you have me back, Laura? I would love to come back. Give me a hearing. Give me a little consideration. I know you blew me off the first time, but listen.
I did. I blew you off because I hated that motorcycle. That motorcycle ad has to be one of the most ridiculous. Governor, one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen was that motorcycle ad. I mean, you just have to say that at this point.
Okay, but here's the deal. I am an authentic motorcycle rider. I race motocross. You find another candidate in the race who actually knows how to saddle up on a motorcycle. I'm unique in that regard. So somebody's got to build a theme around that.
Okay, as long as the motorcycles are Harleys and not made in China, that's fine, Gov. But that's going to be our next discussion.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
All right, we appreciate it. Jon Huntsman.